Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Oliver, and this is The Burning Question. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Josiah Hunt. Josiah is the CEO and founder of Pacific Biochar. He sits on the board of the United States Biochar Initiative, and he's also been featured in movies and online videos such as Dirt Rich. Welcome to the show, Josiah. Pleasure to chat.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
So while we've gotten the chance to chat before, why don't you give us a run through of what Pacific Biochar is, and how it grew.
Okay. So Pacific Biochar really began about almost 11 years ago now. Actually, I guess almost 12 years ago. And in 2009, we were awarded a research grant, a small research grant to do charcoal amended compost, plant growth response, and local agricultural systems. And that is when my experiments in the backyard grew into a business. And the clients that we worked with, or the farmers that we worked with, all became clients. And I developed a small backyard biochar production and distribution business to help meet that demand that had just been created when we saw the plant growth response. Many things have happened, of course, since then. Worked on various different biochar production technologies. And, we worked on trying to invent some, and we worked with some companies that were providing some, specifically Big Char, which is now called PyroCal. We worked with that multiple hearth system, which was pretty cool. We had one in Kauai. We worked to install some in Vietnam. And then what was really interesting is about in 2013, about 7 years ago now, we discovered that large-scale biomass power plants could be modified for biochar production. And that taking this pathway could allow for large amounts of biochar with relatively low capital expenditure. Meaning we can go in there with a relatively small amount of money, modify an existing biomass power plant, and pretty quickly have large amounts of biochar available. At first, I didn't really believe it was possible. I thought it would just be junk, but it actually looked like really good biochar. We started working with it and found it was actually working really well. So since about that time, that's kind of been the focus of Pacific Biochar, just trying to find the low-hanging fruit and trying to make biochar happen on a big scale. And so since 2014, Pacific Biochar has been focused on working with existing biomass power plants modified for biochar production, and then making that biochar available. Biochar not only plain, but also blended into value-added compost, a value-added material such as a biochar-amended compost or a biologically improved biochar product. And we're currently now doing this on a, relatively large scale. I say relatively because compared to the current market, it's relatively large, but it's pretty darn small scale compared to what it could be. But we're working on a relatively large scale here in California, working with a series of biomass power plants producing biochar from forest residues, and distributing that biochar mostly through a series of compost yards and mostly into agricultural fields in California.
Cool. So you buy biochar from power plants, and it sounds like you work with them to set up the equipment to make the biochar, or do they do that, or how's that work?
Yeah, so Pacific Biochar is, in essence, we're similar to a broker, but it's a lot more work than that. We'd hope that that's all we could do, but we're really working on the technology development side, quite integral. So our relationship with the production ends up being more of a partnership. So we partner with these facilities to develop the ability to produce biochar by modifying their biomass power plants.
Nice.
And then we work with the compost yards, but we don't own the compost yards.
Got it.
And then we ship out through a series of trucks, but we don't own the trucks, right? So that's how we're just trying to use, there's already available resources, and we're just trying to utilize those resources to make something happen.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there are different products. It sounds like different product lines, compost all the way through to pure biochar. What part of your business is growing fast, or fastest, I would say?
we've been working really hard on developing biochar in commercial scale agriculture, and we've, all that work has been paying off. We're starting to see larger sales coming in through that. And that really helps. That's probably where the largest volume of our product goes. The horticultural industry, that would be like home gardeners and landscaping. That's also quite a good field for us. It generally, it doesn't take as long or as much inertia to gain clientele in that industry because it's smaller purchases and for other reasons as well. So it's easy to kind of penetrate that market, at least on a small scale. So we do have, that might be as much as a third of our revenue is through sales and horticulture, like smaller, gardens and landscape and things like that. And then, gosh, there's the growing market for us right now is in urban infrastructure. So in what's called like green infrastructure. So landscape architects that do the design for large projects in urban areas, they're now aware of and starting to spec biochar into the building design. And so that's actually a very large market. And so, we're starting to get a lot of traction in that market, which is really useful because in a lot of the urban area, the filtration properties of biochar are highly valued. And the recalcitrance of biochar, the fact that it's an organic matter that's not just going to turn to mud, but it's going to stick around for a long time, that's also really valuable. And they do these bids a good bit in advance, so you do get a little bit of a notice instead of just kind of a phone call one day. It said, hey, I need a dozen truckloads. Can you get them here next week? It's like, that's generally how often the farming community works because it's hard to forecast as much as it is in the urban infrastructure where they have these contracts a long ways out. So that's kind of a view of our market.
Nice. So you recently released like this monster PDF. There's a ton of thinking went into it, quite obviously, and it's called, I think, The Big Plan for California.
Yeah.
And can you describe both, what are the main takeaways and also why you did it? I've been super fun to think about what biochar could become at kind of if you do the theoretical max. So could you walk us through that and how you got there?
Yeah, so it's called the Big California Biochar Model.
Okay.
And the distinction between model and plan, I think, is important because a model can be modified. And that's kind of the intent of it, is that you can use it to model a variety of outcomes, whereas a plan tends to be more specific. But the model, of course, leads to exciting plans. Right. But I didn't want to corner one individual plan, but leave that open for other people to take part in.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, yeah, the Big California Biochar Model. So in California, there is catastrophic wildfires plaguing our forest right now because of 100+ years of forestry management that with well-intentioned forestry management and some of it not well-intentioned. But the end result is we've got a bunch of forests that are not in a healthy state right now. And so there's massive efforts to try and correct this problem quickly because we've got catastrophic wildfires causing incredible damage and even loss of life. And so in the dry forests around here where chronic fire was kind of the ecosystem norm, fire has been suppressed and the trees have been, anyway, there's a long list of management. The bottom line is that now part of the management is that we need to thin the forests a bit. In many cases, they're overburdened. The trees are too close together. And then there's 100 and something million dead trees because of beetle kill, because of drought, climate change, and unhealthy forest because of overstocking and other reasons. So there's a huge amount of forestry residue that needs to be managed and quickly. And we can take that forestry residue and turn it into biochar, use that biochar down in the farmlands to improve water conservation and productivity and reduce nutrient pollution. And this is fascinating to me. And I've been thinking about it, not just kind of on a business scale, but almost on an ecosystem scale. And we had been asked by certain people in the forestry industry like, hey, we've got this massive biomass problem, this massive woody biomass problem. Can you help us? You know, like, could you take it? Could you take all of it? So I wanted to try and start mapping that question. You know, could we take all of it? What would that look like? How much biomass are they talking about? So we had to find those numbers. If we took all that biomass, that woody, the forest residue, not the entire forest, just the excess residue for forest health.
Can you tell me, like, when you say they, are you talking about
CAL FIRE, US Forest Service, private, logging operations. There's a lot of biomass, and a lot of it's just being burned in slash piles right now. Huge amounts of biomass are just being burned in slash piles in the forest. So we could do it.
They'll log, and then they'll have to dispose of the slash, so they'll just burn it on site. And that's kind of the norm. That's business.
It's very common. A lot of the slash is burned on site. Yeah. And some of the slash is brought to biomass power plants and burned for electricity. But I think it's important to recognize that the biomass being brought to the biomass power plants, yes, they're burning it for electricity, but that's almost kind of to help offset the cost, because really they're managing that stuff and they're burning it a heck of a lot cleaner than it would if it was just burnt out in the forest, which is kind of the standard. That's the baseline.
Got it.
All right. So we can do one better than that. Instead of taking that stuff and burning it in a biomass power plant, which does result in a lot cleaner emissions, we can take that and burn it into biochar with lower emissions and less emissions, and resulting in a biochar product, and then take that biochar product and use it. So that's kind of the concept. And so we've been trying to answer, what would that look like? Could we take it all? And then if we took it all and transformed it into biochar, how much biochar would that be? And do we have enough soil? Do we have enough cropland in California to accept that biochar? Mm-hmm. And so we had to model that out. And then we put all the numbers in, and one of the first things we wanted to figure out is, could California soils accept that much biochar? And if so, how long until they're full? And so we looked at, if we applied biochar at the equivalent of 1% organic matter in the top 6 inches, that would be about 9 tons per acre. It would take about 100 years to cover all of California's cropland. So yeah, there's enough, and that would be at 100% of the biomass utilization, which we're not, because they're going to use the biomass for other things also. So even if we're just at, if we took even half of that, which would be a huge number, it would be about a couple hundred years before we had covered all of California's cropland with 1% organic matter in the top 6 inches. And we can go deeper than that. We can go down to 12 inches or 24 or higher percent organic matter. So there's more than enough. So then we were excited and we mapped out, well, what would be the carbon cycle benefits and the water cycle benefits, and we modeled all that stuff out. We went and got research, and we used that for input values in the model, research on water, research on carbon, and we put those into the model. And you can find it online. You can download the model narrative, which discusses all about what we did, and what the model is and how it works and stuff like that. And then you can actually download the model spreadsheet and change the input values to see what would be the output. Like, what if we use only 10% of the forestry biomass and our biochar conversion is 10%? What would the outcome of that be? And these are large numbers. It's pretty exciting. And so we use that to try and model where we're at now and where we think we could be in the near future. And with a series of biomass power plants in California that we can modify, but have not yet modified for biochar production, we could actually get to a very significant amount of biochar production in California. And using that model, we can see what the carbon cycle and water cycle benefits are when doing that. So it's pretty useful and fun tool, and I highly suggest the viewers to go check it out.
Nice. Have you been able to chat with the people at CAL FIRE or any of the kind of component pieces of this kind of puzzle about this work that you've done? Or is there a way for us to get it in front of them? Those conversations are happening. And I'm currently working with some folks at UC Berkeley where we are looking at the model and trying to flesh it out a little bit more. And, particularly with the technology, like, all right, well, let's take that model. Like, what could we achieve? Let's put a number on that model and turn that model into a plan. All right. Like, if we have X, Y, and Z technology and we have 3 years time, what could we achieve? We're kind of starting to look,
a little bit about turning the model into an actual plan, and then adding some credibility to it, like really doing a little more research into a specific aspect of it.
That's so cool. So I guess the last thing that I would love to cover is the carbon sequestration side of this. So you're creating a lot of biochar. Are you currently being compensated for, or are you working with people to start selling carbon credits or offsets or credits for sequestration?
Historically, we have been paid $0 to date for any
Okay,
of the carbon we've sequestered. To date, for any of the carbon that we've sequestered, which is thousands and thousands of tons. But we are working with a group called Carbon Future.
Okay.
And we are working, and hopefully we'll have carbon credits for sale on a marketplace, hopefully before the end of August.
Wow. Okay. Well, so we'll definitely want to check back in on that. That's exciting. And definitely we'll post I've done some poking around in the model, and it's just fun to play with. And thanks so much for doing both the mental work and then sharing it out. So I'll post a little thread on that and share out this conversation. Thanks so much for spending time with us today. And yes, go ahead. Last thing.
I'd like to leave the viewers with a call to action, or just something that I'm really excited about. And that's that the NRCS has a soil carbon amendment plan right now. There's basically what would be considered like a management practice that mentions its soil carbon amendment, and it's for biochar and compost. And it's under the NRCS EQIP program, which would allow federal funding, which in 2019 was $1.78 billion of federal funding went to the EQIP program. It was awarded through the EQIP program. And having the soil carbon amendment, it's been adopted by 3 states. Having the soil carbon amendment means that you can now have a pathway to get funding from the federal farm bill to help pay for compost and biochar applications.
Hey, all right.
NRCS, who their whole thing is all about building soil organic matter and protecting this resource of the soil. So it's great, and it's hard. It is not often known about, but I'm really excited about that. And I implore the people watching here to check it out and to help get this moving forward. Yeah,
that's an exceptional threefer. We have plug, right? Promotion, probably good for you if that goes through, and good for the planet. I'm for it, and it's easy.
Sounds
good.
Thanks
all right. Well, just a pleasure to chat, and we will be in touch. Take care.
Bye.